This time on Poll Hub, we're talking about a brand new project from us here at the Marist Poll. It's called GenNext, and it is very exciting for us because we're having young Americans decide what to ask young Americans. It's a new way of doing youth polling that gives America's newest generation a new voice. It's also an entirely new research and academic experience for students. So we're talking with the two students who helped us launch GenNext with questions about abortion and charitable giving. We're also talking about our roadmap for GenNext and what we're going to be building for the future. And then we finish with a fun fact that makes us all happy because we're all animal lovers. And Eleanor is going to get her due. Yeah, stick around for that one. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Mary Griffith.
I'm Daniela Charter.
And I'm Lee Marinkoff.
So we have a very special episode of Poll Hub this week. There's a new program that we've launched, new project, I should say, that we've launched called GenNext here at the Marist Poll. And you'll hear a lot about it. You may have already heard a lot about it. It's basically America's youth polling America's youth. What we've always been interested in is how we formulate questions, where those questions come from, the perspective of that, and then how that influences what the answers that we get are. And so for a long time, obviously, we've worked with students for 45 years. We thought it would be really interesting to turn it over to the students, to essentially say to students, to young people, what would you ask if you had the opportunity? And they do have the opportunity. So two students who have helped us launch GenNext are with us today to talk about the experience and talk about the data that they produced by asking some really interesting questions, not only of young people, but of all people, but then looking at how young people in particular respond. So Neel Viswanathan is with us and Krystyna Lubrano. Thanks both for joining us for this.
Thank you for having us.
So let me start real quick. Mary Griffith is here with us and Daniela Charter is with us too, because we've been involved along with other staff members at Marist in this project with you guys. But let me just start. What was your initial reason for saying, oh yeah, I want to do this for my honors thesis project, is get involved in this program and to be able to ask questions of your peers? Krystyna, let's start with you.
Thank you. So I think for me, having been a history major, I was expecting to do my honors thesis as a huge paper, but I had talked to Dr. Snyder the semester earlier, and he told me a little bit about this new program that you were interested in piloting. And I was like, that sounds super cool and sounds like really experiential. And that was something I was really interested in. And of course, the opportunity to like almost communicate with like thousands of Americans. It's just, I'm never going to have an opportunity like this again.
Neel?
So I actually did my honors by contract with the Marist Poll last semester. And I feel like last semester I got a good scope of the process, all the different moving parts of the polling process. And I really enjoyed it. So I wanted to come back. And this time we focused a lot more on the data, which I thought was interesting. Because last semester kind of went through the process and we definitely went over the data, but I didn't really internalize it and I wasn't really able to put it into visuals the way that I was this semester. So I think I really wanted to kind of just learn more about polling and the data.
Daniela has been working with each of you very closely in terms of the process. And we're going to get to that in just a second. I wanted to ask each of you, Neel, let's start with you. How did this research advance your overall academic goals? And why did you feel that this project was important?
I thought this project was extremely important because I have two majors, journalism and American studies. And I feel like this is kind of the perfect combination of both of them. I kind of get the like reporting release part of journalism. And then I also get the political side and the historical side of American studies. So I feel like throughout college, I always thought that my two majors were pretty complementary and I had a lot of overlapping classes. But this kind of is like the culmination of that. And it really allows me to put both of my interests into a single body of work.
And Krystyna?
I think this is a really unique opportunity in that it gives you the chance to apply classroom learning like in a real setting. Obviously, like polling is something that's done by people professionally as like a career. So to have the chance to apply something outside of the classroom in like a professional setting was really cool.
I'd like to say that I've been working with students at the Marist Poll for well over a decade now, and it's mostly been on the data collection side. So we have hundreds of students working for us per semester collecting data, and it has really been both a unique and an awesome experience having students go through the entire process from start to finish. actually deciding what the overarching research question is going to be, and then turning that question into questions to put on a survey, collecting the data, analyzing the data, reporting on the data. It's just really been amazing. And I, of course, have to say these two students in particular have just been incredibly awesome. But what I would really like to ask each one of you, and I'll start with you, Krystyna, what was your favorite part of the process?
Oh, so my favorite part was when the survey was actually getting asked and we got to sit in and like tap into the calls while the student callers were calling, and to hear like your questions actually being asked to people. I got a little bit teary-eyed when I like heard it the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, like somebody's answering my question. And of course, like hearing the variety of people that were like answering the call was just like, of course, being from New York, you assume everyone has the same, even the accents that I heard. So that was really cool. That was my favorite part.
Was there anything like that stuck out that a respondent said that was really interesting and stuck out for you?
It wasn't my question. It was one of your questions. Have you smoked at least 100 cigarettes? And somebody got on the phone. They were like, hell yeah, I have. And I was like,
that's really funny. I have to say, when I'm in the survey center and listening in on the calls, I always laugh at that one too. I can't help but giggle each time I hear it. Neel, how about you? What was your favorite part?
I also really enjoyed like the fielding process, monitoring, and kind of hear your questions come to life. Because that was last semester also. That was one of my favorite parts. Because like I always, before I came to college at least, I always saw the Marist Poll, the Siena Poll, all these polls on like news outlets, and I never really knew how the process worked, and like the formulation process or the actual fielding process. It was cool to see the inner workings of it. And I also noticed that there were certain questions that people reacted to not so favorably, or like a lot of the like demographic questions. A lot of people tended to get very defensive about, especially the income questions, which I thought was very interesting.
And hopefully the students reminded them that we asked those for very important reasons.
They did, yeah.
Yep, good. How about, and this will help us because this is a new experience for us, so we know for future semesters and future students, what did you find challenging? And with that, perhaps anything that you think you could have learned more about or been more prepared for in the process? And Neel, go ahead again.
I don't know if I could have necessarily been more prepared for this, but I thought it was a little bit overwhelming when you, after you're done fielding and you get the big, and after we met with Mike, and then we get the big packet back with all the data, and then you have to go through it and find your own like notable pieces of data. That was a little overwhelming, but it was really rewarding to later sit down with Jay and Mary. We came up with our 3 main like bullet points, kind of see how simple the data really, or not necessarily simple, but how effectively you can communicate how complex the data is in pretty brief and like effective language, which I thought was really interesting.
And how about you, Krystyna? What did you find most challenging?
I think getting the question writing down was the most challenging part for me, just because getting into the weeds with language, and you have to be impartial and also like extremely clear and concise. So I feel like sometimes people might be inclined to use like bigger words or to sound smarter or to make something more complex than it really is. But at the end of the day, if you're calling thousands of people, you have no idea what words they might understand. So you have to be as clear and simple as possible.
You are exactly right.
Through challenge, there is great opportunity and great success. So Krystyna, why don't you share your words of wisdom for students who may see GenNext and be like, oh, that's something that I might want to get involved in. What would advice or what would you tell them if they want to get involved in this process?
I would say I feel like I've made the most of my Marist experience, taking advantage of every opportunity that came my way. And if a student is posed with the opportunity to participate in the GenNext program, I would say jump on it. Like absolutely get involved and try to engage with it in a way that like makes sense for you personally as well. So my poll questions were surrounding engagement in political and humanitarian donation culture and volunteer work. And I feel like because I was interested, like personally, in the results, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be there for every survey call. I wanted to be there for everything.
Neel, what about you? What words of wisdom would you share with other Marist students?
I would say definitely, if possible, get involved with GenNext. I felt like almost the first couple years of college, I learned a lot in the classroom, but there wasn't a ton of practical application. And through GenNext, I was really able to see what I've learned come to life. And I learned a lot more from even GenNext than I did from my senior capstone project. That's also research, but this is put to life in a much more active and enriching way, in my opinion. I think that probably the most beneficial thing I've done in college, to be honest, for my educational experience.
Okay, you're hired, Neel. Very good. Good job. Let's switch to the data.
Well, he is in fact working for us this summer.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Then you get a big raise. How about that? That is not within my power, folks. So I can't actually do it. Let's switch to the data because one of the things that I think people should know, Neel, is that you were one of our test drivers last fall, and we wanted to find out how this would work. So we worked with 3 students in a much more limited way to field some questions, to develop some ideas. And you were part of that, much more limited. And then you came back. And this time around, you wanted to ask about abortion rights. Let me ask you first why, and then let's talk about the data.
So I chose abortion because it's such a potent issue, especially past couple of years with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And I thought that it would be interesting in an election year specifically to determine how potent exactly abortion is on people's minds, and also how that influences their vote, if at all.
And one of the things we do in GenNext is obviously we poll everybody. We're not just polling people under 30. What we want to help explore is what people under 30 are thinking, because you guys are the next big generation, right? You're going to replace the boomers as the biggest generation in American history. What is it that you guys are thinking that differs from the way that older folks like us are thinking about? What surprised you about the data that you got back? You talked about this ton of data you got back. What surprised you about the data that you got back in relation to how Gen Z or millennials think versus how boomers and Gen X and the greatest generation think?
I found that Gen Z was much more opinionated on abortion on either side, either being pro-life or pro-choice. Almost a quarter of Gen Z said that abortion is the main fact. They support abortion, and it's the main factor motivating their vote this upcoming election. And on the contrary, I believe about 13% of Gen Z noted that they oppose the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but it's also the main factor motivating their vote. So I saw how on both sides, Gen Z was more opinionated than a lot of other generations. And I think part of that might be due to the influx of social media, or even just saturation of media almost, how Gen Z more than any other generation during childhood and early adulthood has been exposed to so many different opinions and so much information at such a young age. And I think that could definitely lead to people being a lot more opinionated on either side of the aisle.
Krystyna, you just mentioned that to find a topic that really speaks to you and means something to you. And your topic of interest, you took a very different lens that you can look at your topic in very different ways. So share with our listeners what your topic was all about and how you approached it.
Yeah, so I guess my topic can be broken down into 4 quadrants, or at least that's how I tried to conceptualize it when it confused me. So I wanted to look at American engagement, not only in donation culture versus engaged in physical volunteer work, and also engagement with political causes like campaigns versus humanitarian, so like a charity or an NGO, something like that.
So Krystyna, what would you say was the biggest finding from your research, or the most striking finding from your research?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest finding would be the difference in engagement with volunteer work between younger generations and older generations. So I feel like at a college level, there are a lot of opportunities to volunteer just because it's built into the community so much. But what surprised me was that retirees, so baby boomers, aren't really spending their time like that. They were volunteering at a much lower rate than Gen Z. So I thought that was really interesting.
I thought it was interesting, Krystyna, because when Daniela was working with you on determining the topic, one of the things that Mary and I, in developing internally this project, was really fascinated by was what kinds of things would you ask that was different from what we would think to ask. And remember, Daniela,
Yep.
we were like, wow, this is a really interesting topic. What was your experience working with, especially with Daniela, in honing that? Because you came in with kind of a broad idea and you narrowed it down. Not only what was your experience, but did you get what you thought you'd get? Did you get the data that you were hoping to find?
Yeah, so coming in, I was totally like really general. And I feel like on one hand, that was nice because like, you could go anywhere, but on the other hand, you could go anywhere. Daniela was really helpful in helping me like narrow down the question that I really wanted answered. Because of course, there's only so many questions you can ask on a limited survey. So we ended up breaking it down into a type of question that it's one big one. So in the past 2 years, how often have you done each of the following? And then there was bullets of the different things. So donated to a political campaign, donated to a charity or nonprofit, and the same thing for volunteer work. I think through my questions, I was able to get some interesting data that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I was definitely, I felt like I was expecting the numbers to be higher across the board. I thought, I guess maybe because we are like a small liberal arts college in the Northeast, I thought the amount of engagement would be higher. I was also interested that like people were much more engaged with like nonprofits and charity than they were with political campaigns, which like once again, being in college, like everybody's talking about politics all the time. I'm constantly getting text messages, give me $5 and I'll send you a mug. So
you're not alone, by the the way. That's
yeah,
not just
I mean,
college to get those texts every 10 minutes. Yeah.
So I was surprised that like people were much more interested in giving their time or money to like a nonprofit than a political campaign, which nobody talks about that kind of stuff. So that's interesting to me.
Neel and Krystyna, I have one final question for you. And you are the demographic for this project, GenNext. You are, the nation's next generation of leaders. And so, Neel, in conducting your research, is there anything that you learned about your peers in your generation that may have surprised you or may have been completely in line with what you have experienced or what you were thinking?
I think something that definitely surprised me was that on the issue of abortion, people from my generation tended to be more like all or nothing in a sense. So even though the highest percentage of Gen Z is pro-choice compared to any other generation, also like I had one question that was, if there were to be laws that restrict abortion, Gen Z more than any other generation believed that there should be no exceptions to these laws in cases of incest or sexual assault, which I thought was interesting how on one side, Gen Z could be so pro-choice, and then if there were laws to be limiting abortion, Gen Z is also the most conservative when it comes to that, which I didn't really expect.
Krystyna, what about you?
I think what I learned most about my generation, but also a lot of all the other ones as well, was one of the questions was like, how much of an impact do you think your contribution actually has? Does it matter? And we saw that pretty similarly across all the generations. Everyone feels like they do have an impact with whatever they can give, whether that be time or money. And even if it's higher for younger people or lower for older people, or in terms of donations, higher for older people. So I thought that was, I don't know, maybe a little hopeful that everyone still feels like they have some kind of impact.
Well, that could be the best impact that GenNext could have, is leaving us with a little hope in the polling that we do, because we definitely ask a lot of questions that have people on all sides of various issues upset a lot of the time. We're just capturing public opinion. You guys, I just want to say, and I think Daniela and Mary and everybody who worked with you agree, thank you so much for helping us get this project off the ground. And our hope is that you're going to look back 10 years from now and you'll be seeing GenNext and the results of 10 years worth of polling and tracking your generation and other generations, the generation alpha or whatever it's going to be called, coming up behind you. And that you'll say, I was there. I was there at the beginning, because you really have given us a huge lift to get this started. So many thanks for all the work that you've done and for being smart and dedicated and taking our advice with a grain of salt. You took it and you said, but what about this? And that's what we need. Well, we need to have your views and your voices in here. And that's what GenNext is all about. So Neel, Krystyna, thank you so much for everything you've done, and best luck at success going forward. We're always here for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Well, that was certainly an amazing conversation with Neel and Krystyna. Jay, Daniela, and I really enjoyed it, and especially to get their feedback. So let's bring in Lee and Barb now and talk about GenNext and the genesis of the program and where we go from here. So, Barb.
Oh, yeah. It sounded like just an awful opportunity. I can't believe they didn't get anything out of this. I think what is different here at the Marist Poll, you see a lot of academic polls, and a lot of them are public polls that we look to to understand elections and issues. But I think what is unique here at Marist College is that the Marist Institute for Public Opinion has always been integrated into the educational program here at the college. So although we're known best for our data collection, and yes, Daniela has spent many years training, monitoring, and encouraging and directing students and staff to collect the most accurate data that we can, there have been other elements to the program here and the research center, from coursework to internships to students who have participated in each of the different pieces. With our data team, with you, Marion, and also Jay on the media side and the communications side. But this program is very unique for, as you mentioned, a couple reasons. One is that a student has the opportunity to do the entire thing themselves. And Neel mentioned that he was part of Honors by Contract. And that's a 1-credit course that honors students take to get up to speed kind of on their topic and to figure out what it is they actually want to do for their undergraduate thesis. And so he worked with us, and that is part of the program as well. If you are a student who is a data geek, or you have that fear of math and aren't really sure what your rows and columns should be, that 1-credit course, which this semester was just for honor students, but will be for all students in the future, takes you through the beginning skills that you're going to need in order to do research. Most students at Marist do have a research course that they take as part of their major, but this is a really practical, hands-on, nitty-gritty, how do I deal with data, both survey and secondary data that you might find as well. And then they went through the entire process from ideation of what was important to them to analyzing the data. Now, obviously, they're working with the whole team at the Marist Poll. And they mentioned Mike too, because Mike worked with them on how to read their data and how to analyze it, and some statistics behind it as well. But it was a very unique opportunity for them to do that. And then, of course, Jay, the other half, which you have mentioned, is that it's GenNext. It's not about just Gen Z. It is now. It is now, because Gen Z is the group between 18 and 25. And actually, they extend younger and older than that. But we will continue to be speaking with people, adults between 18 and 25, from generation to generation. And that's the whole idea behind GenNext. And I think I probably took too much time, didn't I, Lee? Because I filibustered. I filibustered through all of this.
I think we should have a vote closure on that then. Is that what they do in the Senate? Anyway, okay, so here's the bottom line for me. Okay, I was simply blown away by the two students. Okay, I've done this for almost 50 years, from all kinds of educational parts, from chalk and talk all the way up to what you all just listened to. And I think we should just award these two kids PhDs and let them go out and do whatever they want to at this point, because that was just so impressive. And I think I agree with you, Barb, on the notion of it showed how they, as students, were able to integrate their education. If you want to think of a college education as 40 discrete courses for 120 credits, and how you, as a teacher and as a college, create linkages for students in their education, because that's what we're trying to do, provide a comprehensive, holistic approach. So what they were able clearly to do was to integrate. So this was a way to pull it together, their majors, their research focus, data, the creation of information. They were just doing the whole thing. And I thought, so that was one point. The second point I would make is I thought that this was, as part of the research project, a very collaborative process. And I think you mentioned that. And I think that's really important, because they're all going to go out and do things in the world. The two students and all the students we have are going to take their diplomas and take it to the next step. And part of that in the workplace or whatever it is going to be collaborative. And these students got a real professional exposure where they had a step up. I think they came in with an awful lot. I'd like to think that we took them from 0 to 100. They probably came in with 90 and we just put the other 10 on it. But that extra points was really great. So it was integrative, it was collaborative. And the only part I don't like is the notion that this generation will, in terms of replacement, the boomers are going to fall off the table. I'm not quite sure what that means, and maybe that can be explained to me, but they fall off the table, and then these folks come in. And as a boomer, I want a parachute if I'm going off any high places on this falling off. Anyway, so that's my take.
Well, hang on. I do have one other thought, and I know Mary and Jay, you have a tough time shutting us up, but I did also want to mention that it was a whole team effort. In other words, the students worked with each of our team members in all of the different areas here at the Marist Poll. But I do want to give special thanks to Jay and Mary because they really came up with this idea, and an idea also of how to pilot it along with Daniela, roping in the academic dean as well. But Lee and I charged the team with come up with something out of the box to give students a unique experiential opportunity here at the college with having the unique center here of the poll. And this was their concoction. And I know that it will continue to grow, to change, and to develop as we go forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say this should be replicated. I don't think there's much growth need. I mean, if we could do this again, I think that'd be terrific.
They've got ideas, Lee. They've got ideas.
I'm sure they do.
And actually, you know what? Maybe you can share just for another minute. I know you want to wrap us here, but
no, I don't want to wrap. I just wanted to make a point.
Please tell us. Oh, I know, isn't it tough? But tell us some of the things that you guys are looking to do going forward.
Lee, to your point about boomers going off the cliff, that was not the intention of this at all. Really, we see that this generation as the next generation of leaders. And what Jay and I experienced working with our media assistants is that there are certain issues that really resonate with our students that they bring out to discuss on the podcast and in other areas and in our social media content. And so what we thought about when we're talking about where do we go next in our polling, which is what are the topics that are important to the next generation of America's leaders. And as we've been discussing, it isn't just about Gen Z. It's about the next generation and the topics that are important and how they differ with us older people and how that's going to translate into our political conversations and just our societal conversations moving forward. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to tell Lee, we're not pushing you off the cliff.
Bless your heart. And now, if that wasn't enough fun, we're moving to the actual fun fact, which is a little bit a change of pace here. Gallup poll 1955. Have you ever given a home to a stray dog or cat? And the answer was, from a national sample, yes, 71%, no, 29%. I'm rounding, so it adds up to 100. We do that around here. But stray animals, cats, dogs, why don't we start out with Mr. J. DeDapper here?
Me?
I have a funny feeling the answer is yes.
Actually, the answer is no, but I think there's a way that you define this, and I don't know what that meant in 1955. I know there were pounds, and I don't know when the ASPCA was founded, but we got our first dog in the 60s from a pound. We always got dogs from pounds. I've never had anything but animals that have been from pounds, and that's not a stray, but in my definition, that's a stray. Also, I will note that May 20th, the reason we're doing this is May 20th is National Rescue Dog Day. So we rescued our last dog we rescued from Hurricane Katrina. I don't know. I think I count on that. I'd be a yes. That's my definition of a stray.
Yeah, I think you're a yes on that in a contemporary definition. Let me go to Mary Griffith.
So when I was growing up as a teenager, we quote unquote took in a stray cat, but my mom was not a big fan of pets. So we sort of took care of the stray but didn't really take the cat in. So we fed her for a couple of days until she found a better home. But I certainly would take in a stray, no question about it.
And Barb, you are a major animal lover. I'm thinking not yes or no, but how many?
This was stray everything from broken wings to stranded wildlife to. I might add that I spent a good amount of time growing up in a more rural area. During that time, it wasn't the 1950s, but people would often come up to homes there, spend the summer, and then not to know what to do with their animals. And they would see some big open property and perhaps a house with some kids. And our driveway and our front fields often had stray animals being left there to hope somebody would care for them. And they were generally correct as long as we found them, which wasn't always the case. So it provides some traumatic moments for us as well. But dogs, cats, as I mentioned, other wildlife, and my family, it was people too. People would come along on the road and they'd be walking and not realizing it was a lot farther to the nearest watering hole, and they'd come knocking on the door just to take a little respite. And they were
sometimes
always
ended up, as I recall, they ended up with was it a Thanksgiving dinner or an Easter dinner?
Oh, absolutely.
I forget what.
If it was on a
Timing.
if it was on a Sunday afternoon, they absolutely
They hit
had
the right
dinner
house
as well. There was always more water in the soup and another chair at the table. So,
Barb, I do want to clarify for my own knowledge right now, the cow that you had growing up, that I assume was not a stray, a cow that went to your property.
No, Eleanor was not a stray, but she did stray to other properties, which was always quite entertaining. We had a neighbor who prided himself then as being incredibly fit. And Eleanor wandered into their yard because I guess they had some wild strawberries, which were her favorite. And she wandered into their yard, and we were calling Eleanor to get her back. And the homeowner said, well, let me help. I can do this. And he started going towards Eleanor, and she started running back to her pasture. And as he got back to our house out of breath, he said, I can't believe it. I'm not even as fit. I can't even keep up with a pregnant cow. So it was kind of a sorry moment for him, despite all his efforts.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis and Rebecca Hendricks.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub.
And with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.